My name is Marcus. I've never been the kind of guy who cared much about appearances. While others obsessed over brand names and trends, I found solace in simplicity. Worn-out jeans that had molded perfectly to my body over years of use. Simple t-shirts in neutral colors, and sneakers that had seen better days but still served their purpose. These were the staples of my daily existence. For me, what mattered was character, not clothing. What mattered was the person beneath the fabric, not the fabric itself. I believed, perhaps naively, that substance would always trump style, that authenticity was more valuable than aesthetication, that being real was better than looking perfect. My girlfriend Vanessa was my complete opposite in this regard. She was vain in the best sense of the word, elegant, meticulous, perfectionistic. She worked in fashion marketing for a prestigious agency downtown, and she was always impeccable. Every outfit was coordinated down to the smallest detail. Her hair was always styled just right. Her makeup was an art form. Even her casual wear looked like it had been curated by a personal stylist. In the early months of our relationship, this stark contrast never seemed to be an issue. In fact, she claimed to love it. "I love your carefree, authentic style," she'd say with a warm smile, running her fingers through my perpetually messy hair. "It's refreshing. Everyone in my world is so obsessed with image. You're real." I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She seemed genuine, and I was falling in love. But as the seasons changed and our relationship deepened, something else began to shift. The comments started subtle at first, easy to dismiss as innocent observations. "Hey, do you want to stop by a store after this?" she'd ask casually while we were out. "Those sneakers have definitely seen better days, haven't they?" she'd mention with a light laugh. "Have you ever thought about trying something new with your hair? Maybe just a different style?" Initially, I brushed these comments aside. I figured it was just her professional eye, automatically assessing everything around her. Fashion was her job, after all. Or maybe it was harmless vanity, the kind that came from caring about aesthetics. I didn't take it personally, but the comments became more frequent, more pointed. The casual suggestions transformed into veiled criticisms. The light observations carried weight. Still, I loved Vanessa. I loved her laugh, her ambition, her passion for her work. I loved how she could talk for hours about color theory and brand identity. I loved the way she looked at the world, seeing beauty and potential everywhere. So I tried to adapt, to meet her halfway, to show her that I was willing to evolve. I started paying more attention to what I wore when we went out together. I replaced a few of my most tattered shirts. I even got a haircut at a salon she recommended instead of my usual barbershop. Small changes, I thought. Reasonable compromises in a relationship, but it was never quite enough. Looking back now, I can see how gradually I began to lose myself. It didn't happen all at once. That would have been too obvious, too jarring. Instead, it was a slow erosion, like water wearing away stone over centuries. Imperceptible in the moment, but devastating in its cumulative effect. I stopped hanging out with some of my oldest friends because Vanessa found them immature or lacking ambition. I abandoned hobbies I'd enjoyed for years because they did unfit the image of the person she wanted me to become. I started watching what I said in public, filtering my thoughts, moderating my opinions to avoid her subtle disapproval. My apartment, which had once been a comfortable chaos of books, art supplies, and vintage finds, slowly transformed into something more presentable. The posters came down. The mismatched furniture was replaced with sleek, modern pieces that Vanessa helped me select. Even my bookshelf was reorganized not by subject or author, but by color, because it looked better that way. "You're growing up," she'd say encouragingly. "Maturing. That's a good thing." But was it? I couldn't quite shake the feeling that I wasn't maturing. I was disappearing. The person I saw in the mirror each morning felt increasingly like a stranger, like someone playing a role in someone else's story. My friends noticed, my brother noticed, even my coworkers commented on how I'd changed. But whenever someone expressed concern, I'd defend the transformation. "I'm just evolving," I'd insist. "People change. That's normal in a relationship." The truth, I couldn't admit, even to myself, was that I wasn't changing. I was being changed. There's a profound difference between growth and erasure, but I was too deep in it to see the distinction. Vanessa, to her credit, probably didn't realize the extent of what was happening either. She wasn't a villain in this story. She was just someone who had a very specific vision of what her life should look like. and she was unconsciously trying to fit me into that vision, like a puzzle piece that did unquite match. It all came crashing down on an ordinary Friday evening. Nothing about the day suggested it would be a turning point. The weather was pleasant. Traffic was light. I'd had a decent day at work. Vanessa had texted me earlier, excited about a dinner she'd organized with some of her colleagues from the agency. "Wear something nice," her message had said, followed by a string of emojis. I did try. I wore my newer jeans, still comfortable, but without holes or fraying. I put on a gray t-shirt that was relatively new, and I added a Jaquita navy blue hoodie that I particularly liked. And yes, I wore my old sneakers, the ones that had been with me through countless adventures, the ones that fit perfectly and never gave me blisters. When I arrived at her apartment to pick her up, she looked stunning. She wore an elegant black dress that hugged her figure perfectly, high heels that made her legs look endless, and makeup that was both subtle and transformative. She looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine spread. And then she looked at me. I saw it happen in real time, the scan from head to toe, the assessment, the calculation. Her face went through a series of micro-expressions: surprise, disappointment, frustration, and finally, resignation. She let out a long sigh, the kind that communicates exhaustion and exasperation in equal measure. Then, she smiled. But it wasn't a real smile. It was the kind of smile you give when you're trying to be polite, but feeling anything but. It was the kind of smile that's really a mask for something much uglier underneath. "You look like a homeless guy," she said, her voice flat and matter-of-fact. "I'm embarrassed to be seen with you." The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a gun. Time seemed to slow down. I could hear the ticking of her wall clock. I could hear my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. I could hear the distant sound of traffic outside her window. It wasn't a joke. There was no playful lilt in her voice, no indication that she was teasing or exaggerating for effect. The statement was dry, cold, loaded with contempt, and worst of all, it carried a sincerity that cut deeper than any scream or insult could have. In that moment, something fundamental shifted inside me. It wasn't anger, exactly, though there was anger there too. It wasn't even hurt, though the hurt was profound and immediate. It was something closer to clarity, sudden, sharp, undeniable clarity. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't try to change her mind or plead my case. I simply nodded, turned around, walked out of her apartment, closed the door quietly behind me, and pulled out my phone to call an Uber. As I stood on the sidewalk waiting for my ride, I felt something crack open inside me, or perhaps finally break free. Years of trying to be enough, of molding myself to fit someone else's expectations, of diminishing my own preferences and personality to make room for hers, all of it came rushing to the surface. The Uber arrived. I got in. The driver asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. I wasn't fine, but I would be. In the days that followed, Vanessa tried to walk it back. The messages started coming almost immediately. "I'm so sorry about tonight. I was stressed from work and I took it out on you. That was wrong. I didn't mean what I said. You know I think you're great. Can we talk? Please. I feel terrible. I overreacted. I was just anxious about the dinner, and I projected that onto you. I'm really sorry." The messages continued for days. Voicemails, texts, even a handwritten letter delivered to my apartment. Each communication was an attempt to minimize what had happened, to reframe it as a momentary lapse rather than a revelation of deeper truth. But I couldn't unhear those words. More importantly, I couldn't unsee what they represented. Not just her judgment of my appearance, but the entire dynamic of our relationship. How much of myself had I surrendered? How many pieces of my identity had I filed away or discarded entirely to become palatable to her? I needed space, not out of spite or to punish her, but out of genuine self-preservation. I needed to step back and figure out who I was outside of her influence, outside of her expectations, outside of her world. So I told her I needed time. She didn't take it well. The apologetic messages gave way to confused ones, then frustrated ones, then angry ones, then, eventually, silence. And in that silence, I began to rediscover myself. The first week was the hardest. I kept reaching for my phone to text her, to share some random thought or funny observation. The apartment felt too quiet without her voice filling it. The weekends felt empty without our routines. But gradually, something else began to emerge. I started doing things I'd abandoned. I called up friends, I'd neglected people I'd distanced myself from because they did unfit into Vanessa's social ecosystem. We grabbed beers, played video games, went to concerts, had conversations that stretched into the early morning hours. I remembered what it felt like to laugh without self-consciousness, to speak without filtering every word. I pulled out my old sketchbooks, dusty relics from a time when I dreamed of being an illustrator. The pages were filled with half-finished drawings, character designs, comic strips that never went anywhere. I picked up a pencil, hesitant at first, my hand rusty from disuse, but slowly, the muscle memory returned. The lines started flowing again. I began taking care of my health, not because someone told me I should, but because I wanted to feel better. I started running in the mornings, something I'd done in college but had stopped for no particular reason. The physical exertion felt like a cleansing, like I was running away from the person I'd become and toward the person I wanted to be. And yes, eventually, I did upgrade my wardrobe, but not because of Vanessa's words. Not to prove anything to her or to anyone else. I did it because I realized that personal style could be a form of self-expression rather than self-abandonment. I could dress in a way that was both comfortable and intentional. I could look put together without sacrificing authenticity. I didn't become a fashion model. I still prioritized comfort. I still wore sneakers and jeans, but they were better quality now, better fitting, chosen with purpose rather than defaulted to out of indifference. I got a better haircut, not the one Vanessa had suggested, but one that felt like me, just a more refined version. The change wasn't about becoming someone else. It was about becoming a better version of myself for myself. 2 months after that fateful Friday night, I ran into Vanessa at a coffee shop downtown. It was completely accidental. I was there meeting a friend, and she was picking up an order to go. Our eyes met across the crowded cafe. There was a moment of mutual recognition, of surprise, of uncertainty about whether to acknowledge each other or pretend we hadn't seen one another. She approached first. As she got closer, I saw her eyes scan me not with the critical assessment of before, but with something closer to surprise. For the first time since I'd known her, there was no criticism in that look, just silence, just observation. "Hi," she said, a bit awkwardly. "Hey," I replied, keeping my tone neutral, but not cold. "You look different," she said, and there was something in her voice I couldn't quite identify. "You look good. You look ... happy." I smiled, a genuine smile this time, not forced or performative. "I am," I said simply. "I'm doing really well, actually." We made small talk for a few minutes. She told me about a new campaign her agency was launching. I told her about a freelance illustration project I'd landed. The conversation was polite, cordial even, but there was something definitively closed about it. Neither of us suggested getting together. Neither of us asked for the other's number, though we'd both changed phones. Neither of us tried to resurrect what had been. The cycle had completed itself. The chapter had closed, and we both knew it. As I watched her leave the cafe, order in hand, I felt an unexpected wave of gratitude wash over me. Not gratitude for the relationship itself, but for how it ended. For that brutal, honest moment that had shattered my complacency and forced me to confront uncomfortable truths. Today, looking back on that period of my life, I'm genuinely thankful for Vanessa's harsh words. They hurt, God. Did they hurt? They cut to the core of my self-worth and made me question my value. But they also woke me up from a long sleep, a comfortable numbness I'd been living in. Sometimes the most important moments in our lives come wrapped in pain. Sometimes the catalyst for positive change is negative experience. Sometimes we need to be broken down before we can build ourselves back up, stronger and more authentic than before. I learned that compromise in a relationship is important, but self-erasure is not compromise. I learned that growth means evolving while maintaining your core identity, not discarding your identity to become someone else's ideal. I learned that love, real love, doesn't require you to diminish yourself to fit into someone else's vision. I also learned that appearance does matter, but not in the way I'd thought it did, and not in the way Vanessa had insisted it did. How we present ourselves to the world is a form of communication, a way of expressing who we are and how we want to be perceived. There's nothing wrong with caring about that. The key is doing it for yourself, as an extension of your identity rather than a rejection of it. These days, I dress intentionally. I take care of my appearance, but I also wear what makes me comfortable, what makes me feel like myself. I've found a balance between comfort and style, between authenticity and presentation. More importantly, I've found peace with who I am. I still draw. I still hang out with my friends. I still live in a space that reflects my personality rather than some interior design trend. I still prioritize character over superficiality, but I also understand that taking care of how you look is unsuperficial. It's another way of taking care of yourself, of showing the world that you value yourself enough to make an effort. The woman I'm seeing now appreciates me as I am. She's never once suggested I change anything fundamental about myself. She compliments my style choices but never criticizes them. We challenge each other to grow, but that growth comes from encouragement and support, not from criticism and shame. And when I look in the mirror now, I recognize the person staring back at me. He's evolved from who he was, certainly. He's more confident, more intentional, more self-aware, but he's still fundamentally himself, still authentic, still real. That Friday night, when Vanessa told me I looked like a homeless guy, and that she was embarrassed to be seen with MIT, was one of the worst moments of my life. But it was also, paradoxically, one of the most important. Because sometimes, the harshest words contain the most necessary truths. Sometimes, the moments that hurt us the most are the ones that ultimately heal us. Sometimes, we need someone to show us who we're not, so we can remember who we are. I don't hold any anger toward Vanessa anymore. I hope she's happy. I hope she's found someone who fits naturally into her world, someone who doesn't need to be reshaped to belong there. And I hope she's learned some lessons too about acceptance, about love, about the difference between improvement and transformation. As for me, I'm grateful. Grateful for the relationship, for the ending, for the pain, and for the awakening that followed. I'm grateful that I was forced to lose myself, because it taught me how to find myself again. I'm grateful for the harsh truth, because it was the truth I needed to hear, even if it wasn't delivered with kindness. Life has a strange way of teaching us what we need to learn, when we need to learn it. Sometimes those lessons come from the people we love. Sometimes they come wrapped in words we never wanted to hear. But if we're willing to sit with the discomfort, to process the pain, to do the difficult work of self-examination and reconstruction, we can emerge stronger, clearer, more fully ourselves than we've ever been. And that's worth more than any perfectly coordinated outfit or carefully curated image. That's worth everything. 6 months later, I sold my first major illustration graphic novel cover for an independent publisher. It wasn't a huge deal by industry standards, but for me, it was validation that I'd made the right choice in returning to my passion. I framed the first check I received, not because of the money, but because of what it represented, proof that being authentically yourself, pursuing what genuinely matters to you, and refusing to diminish your identity for anyone else's comfort, these things have value. They have power. My apartment is once again a reflection of who I am: comfortable chaos organized by personal logic rather than aesthetic principle. My friends are back in my life, fully. My family comments on how much happier I seem. My work is fulfilling. My relationships are genuine, and when I get dressed each morning, I choose clothes that make me feel good, not clothes chosen to please someone else or meet someone else's standards. I choose comfort with intention, authenticity with awareness, self-expression with confidence. The old sneakers are gone, finally retired after years of faithful service, but the new ones I bought, they're just as comfortable. And that's what matters most. I'm not perfect. I'm still figuring things out. I still have moments of doubt and insecurity, but I'm doing it as myself, not as some curated version designed to fit someone else's vision. And that makes all the difference. The wake-up call was harsh, but I'm awake now, and I'm never going back to sleep. Authentic, still real. That Friday night, when Vanessa told me I looked like a homeless guy, and that she was embarrassed to be seen with MIT, was one of the worst moments of my life. But it was also, paradoxically, one of the most important. Because sometimes, the harshest words contain the most necessary truths. Sometimes, the moments that hurt us the most are the ones that ultimately heal us. Sometimes, we need someone to show us who we're not, so we can remember who we are. I don't hold any anger toward Vanessa anymore. I hope she's happy. I hope she's found someone who fits naturally into her world, someone who doesn't need to be reshaped to belong there. And I hope she's learned some lessons too about acceptance, about love, about the difference between improvement and transformation. As for me, I'm grateful. Grateful for the relationship, for the ending, for the pain, and for the awakening that followed. I'm grateful that I was forced to lose myself, because it taught me how to find myself again. I'm grateful for the harsh truth, because it was the truth I needed to hear, even if it wasn't delivered with kindness. Life has a strange way of teaching us what we need to learn, when we need to learn it. Sometimes those lessons come from the people we love. Sometimes they come wrapped in words we never wanted to hear. But if we're willing to sit with the discomfort, to process the pain, to do the difficult work of self-examination and reconstruction, we can emerge stronger, clearer, more fully ourselves than we've ever been. And that's worth more than any perfectly coordinated outfit or carefully curated image. That's worth everything. 6 months later, I sold my first major illustration graphic novel cover for an independent publisher. It wasn't a huge deal by industry standards, but for me, it was validation that I'd made the right choice in returning to my passion. I framed the first check I received, not because of the money, but because of what it represented, proof that being authentically yourself, pursuing what genuinely matters to you, and refusing to diminish your identity for anyone else's comfort, these things have value. They have power. My apartment is once again a reflection of who I am: comfortable chaos organized by personal logic rather than aesthetic principle. My friends are back in my life, fully. My family comments on how much happier I seem. My work is fulfilling. My relationships are genuine, and when I get dressed each morning, I choose clothes that make me feel good, not clothes chosen to please someone else or meet someone else's standards. I choose comfort with intention, authenticity with awareness, self-expression with confidence. The old sneakers are gone, finally retired after years of faithful service, but the new ones I bought, they're just as comfortable. And that's what matters most. I'm not perfect. I'm still figuring things out. I still have moments of doubt and insecurity, but I'm doing it as myself, not as some curated version designed to fit someone else's vision, and that makes all the difference. The wake-up call was harsh, but I'm awake now, and I'm never going back to sleep.